Whitehouse Productions presents a Miniature Railway Adventures feature-length story, The Adventure Like No Other. It is written and based on a storyline by Michael White. This audiobook is performed by the author. Prologue. For many years, researchers have been trying to find out the way in which our universe works, how it functions, and what lies beyond. As a young boy, William Thompson had always found travelling to be an adventure in its own making. But being a young boy with a mind full of possibilities, he always wanted to see if there were other places that man has never seen before. In his youth during the war, he'd lie on the grass of the countryside he was evacuated to and look at the fighter planes soaring through the skies on their way to who knows where. No one told him that they were on their way to fight a great war. To William, he thought that they were explorers out on daring adventures, to seek new worlds and to bring back treasures of what they found. The only things of those who did make it back were signs of pain, sorrow, and grief. William wondered what lay out there in this vast world that held so many places to see, and what was out there that had left these explorers so wounded and broken. When the war ended and when he was of age, William began his journey, taking jobs of anyone that is required to travel abroad. Many years he travelled the globe, meeting many cultures and learning many languages. But his search to find what he was seeking proved to be impossible. There were other wars that he had seen take place, but he didn't think they would be powerful enough to bring such dread to the likes of the ones he'd seen as a boy. Finally, after travelling the whole Earth, William had decided that the problem was not here on Earth, but beyond its surface. After studying and receiving his master's in science and physics, William began setting to work on building a device that would allow him, or anyone for that matter, to travel beyond the realms of the Earth's reality. He became friends with a local mechanic and part-time engineer of an engineering society who found the idea to be something of a joke, but noticed how serious William was taking each step. William's request for certain parts to be made all resulted in many questions to be asked, which were quickly answered in haste, but detailed answers that left the greatest of minds with a migraine. Soon the machine began to come together, and each day grew bigger in size. As for a name, William called it the TEC. This stood for Telepathic Engineered Corridor. The TEC structure can only be described as that of a large vertical ring, held upright by strong brackets, to which a system of computers and panels controlled the levels of current that swept through the many cables that trailed the workshop floor. But no matter what he did, William could not get the thing to work the way he wanted it to. His vision was to create a kind of passageway that would allow anyone to walk through and be instantly transported to a new location from which they originated from. But all he managed to create was little more than a miniature lightning storm and smoke. He kept a diary on how each trial ended, and within each log it always ended with the same thing. Perhaps this next trial will see a difference. Many experiments failed, till at last William had enough. One day, in a fit of rage after another failed trial, he kicked the machine with such force that a sudden power surge propelled him across his workshop. William stared as he got to his feet. Within the centre of the ring, a swirling vortex of pure energy had appeared. He couldn't quite work out what or how he managed to get the tech to work, but he wasn't going to waste the opportunity to see what it does. As he drew closer to the portal, he could feel the winds of the vortex creating a small suction which drew him nearer and nearer till he was just at the edge of the ring itself. Carefully, he stretched out his arm and placed it through. He checked the other side of the ring to see no arm appear, but can be seen within the ring. He withdrew it back, flexing his fingers on his hand to check that everything was all working fine. No bones broken from the vacuum force, and no signs of any sudden radiation sickness or burns. Good. Now for the ultimate test. Taking his jacket off, William took a run up, and for a sudden moment, while his feet left the ground in the process of an athletics leap, William felt the old feeling he felt when he was a boy. He could feel the warm vapors of the vortex as it pulled him into the unknown. This was the beginning of an adventure like no other. As soon as William jumped, the portal closed. No sooner had it closed did the vortex appear once more. Only this time, William didn't emerge from within. Instead, a small cylinder-type object shot out and clanged against the workshop wall, hitting the shutdown switch on the text panel. Something slushed inside as it rolled to a stop. With that done, the vortex closed, leaving plumes of blue smoke within the center of the ring, and the text stood there, silent, silent as the grave. Many years had passed, and by now the hunt for William Thompson was becoming more and more unsuccessful. The police did all they could, and many searches around the areas in which William was last seen were called off. The witnesses, now old, tired and depressed, had also come to terms that William had vanished off the face of the earth completely. One by one they began to fade away, like the memories they cherished for so long. Williams's house had also become a faded memory. In time the structure became weakened, till at last the council had to demolish it to make way for future plans. However, Williams's workshop remained untouched, as well as the tech. It still sat within its cocoon-like walls of brick and mortar, waiting for the next spark of light to awaken it from its slumber. Spiders created their webs around the portal ring, and the dust had formed in great mounds of the controls to a point that they almost became part of the machine itself. Outside, the sounds of the modern world could be heard, but the most distinct noise of them all was the sound of a steam whistle of the kind from a miniature locomotive. Chapter 1. The Discovery. Summer had arrived. Spring had welcomed the greenery back into the hillsides, and the rivers were flowing once more, steady and calm without no hint of worry for any passer-by. In the evening times, the leaves on the trees changed from a rich shade of green to that which makes one think that they were made from pure gold. One of these evenings brought the day to an end for the Model Engineer Society. Their work for the day had proven to be good, and the visitors to the railway left with pleasant enthusiasm. Most of the members had packed up and left for home, but still activity showed from within the walled gardens, as preparations were being planned. "So, it's settled," said Cars, as he finalized the document before him. "We each have our roles to play if we're going to make this the best steam fair yet." "But why do we have to do it in front of everyone? You know I get stage fright." "Can't be helped, Case. We were the ones chosen to do it, and so we have to perform, whether we like it or not. Now come on, guys, from the top. 1, 2, 3. The tuneless voices of the three boys rang out through the walls of the mess room, while the dimly heard melody of Old Rosie by the Wurzels played on the speakers of the old CD player. Okay, that'll do for tonight," Carr said at last, lowering his hands from conducting. "Maybe a bit more practice is in order. You can turn the CD off now, Jane." Jane! Jane! Jane could not hear, for she had stuffed her ears with cotton wool and was occupying herself with a good book. She soon noticed Cars waving at her and switched the player off. Sighing heavily as he slumped into a chair, Cars thought about what to do. "I don't see how we're going to do it next week," he said. "We'll be a complete show-up." "But why does it have to be these sort of songs?" said Whitehouse. "What about a bit of old classic rock and roll? That'll get the toes tapping." "I agree," said Corpse. "These songs are barely known, and some of them don't actually have that much rhythm to go by. Let us not forget that we were chosen to perform a nostalgia concert for the elderly members," Cars reminded them. "They wouldn't take interest in some of our modern tunes, unlike the classics that they remember. No, it's best we stick with the plan as arranged." "Well, maybe Corpse should whip us up a voice tuner like what they use for tuning guitars," joked Casey. Corpse chuckled. "I don't think I can make our voices sound like Freddie Mercury's," he said. "Well, one thing is for sure," said Carr, standing up. "We need to learn these tunes from start to finish by Friday morning. I'll be sending you each copies of the songs we've been asked to sing tonight via email. And for goodness sake, do your best to remember the lyrics. We can't always say la 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 when we feel like it." Inquisitive eyes landed on Casey, who turned pink. The five got themselves sorted out and began to leave for home. As Corpse drove out of the grounds, he noticed from the light of his headlights an old building sitting behind a set of poplar trees. Strange. I've never seen that before, he muttered. I wonder if anyone else knows us here. He drove over and stopped the car outside. The building was covered with vegetation, but looked to be in sturdy condition, almost as if it had just been built. But there was a window that had one stage been smashed by vandals, and Corpse was curious as to what was inside. There were several old oil drums that the MCS nearby had chucked away, and so he used one to stand on, making sure not to get any of the contents of the drums on his clothes. There was something in there, but he couldn't quite make it out. As he jumped down, a torchlight shone on his face. The security guard had come down from the top of the hill and was checking to see that everyone had left the railway before logging out for the night. It's all right, I'm with the railway, Corpse explained, and showed him his pass. Mind I ask what you were doing behind those trees? The guard asked. Corpse quickly thought up a lie. Well, basically, one of our younger engineers was flying their model airplanes around here earlier on, and it got lost. I thought I'd seen it amongst these trees here, but I was wrong. Fair dues, the guard said after a pause. Is just yourself left? Yeah. Right, well, I'm checking the old village section of this place and see that's been closed up. The chain and lock will be left on the gate. I'll be back in 5 minutes for one last check over. Corpse waved as the guard headed on. I think I'll come back here tomorrow and take a closer look at that object. For all we know, it could be something important. Might need some help with this one, though. I'll see what Casey and Whitehouse are up to tomorrow. Can you see anything? Just darkness. Hey, keep still. How can I look if you can't keep still? It's not easy when you're pressing hard down on my shoulders. Keep quiet, you two. We don't want to cause a scene. Here, Kiss, here's a torch. See if you can make out what's inside there. Carefully, Casey turned on the torch and peered in. The light shone round with a white beam till eventually reflected off a piece of metal. I can see something, but I'm not sure what it is. Can you describe it? Said Whitehouse. Maybe it's something important. Casey leaned over the hole a little further. Suddenly, he lost his balance, and he fell head over heels with a yelp. There was a crash as he landed on a crate. Are you all right, Case? Just about, came the reply, albeit a bit harsh. We'll get up close to the object and see if you can make it out, whispered Corpse. There was a long pause before the sounds of shuffling could be heard, as well as a few yelps as Casey walked into a spider's web. At last, after a few spluttering spits, they could hear him exclaim as he found a light switch on the wall. What is it? What can you see? Said Whitehouse. I don't know, said Casey after a pause. Hang on, there's a door here. The slide boat's a bit stiff here, but it should move. There was a thud, and part of the ivy moved away, revealing a doorway. Now Corpse and Whitehouse could enter and see for themselves what Casey saw. There were several crates of parts and drawers filled with blueprints and drawings, but the centre of the room was a kind of contraption of sorts, nothing like any of the three would have seen before. Its main structure was a large ring of a diameter of 10 feet, with cast iron brackets keeping it vertically upright. Along the brackets snaked a series of cables which linked to a sort of large computer of decades past. That truly is something, awed Corpse. I wonder what year it's from. He pressed a few keys on the old keyboard. After years of neglect, Corpse was surprised that they didn't stick when he pressed them. He tried the start switch. There was a flicker of light on the monitor, which quickly faded when it appeared. Rarely used by the looks of it, Corpse muttered. So why leave it here of all places? Probably for the best if it doesn't work, said Casey. Perhaps. Or maybe it was not discovered to begin with. Whitehouse scratched his head. What, you mean someone built this machine years ago and afterwards decided just to leave it here? It sounds a bit fishy to me. Corpse walked around the machine, trying to take in every bit of circuitry he could spot. All the components looked very vintage and yet crafted in a way that would take years to put together. It just didn't make sense. As he racked his brain on the matter, his eyes noticed an old notebook that was placed on the designer's table close by. Maybe this might give us a clue, he said, and flicked through a few pages. He mouthed some of the words, now and again making several sharp intakes of air, revealing some of the text he was reading. Interesting, Corpse said at last. Found anything? Asked Whitehouse. It seems like this was made around the time of the late 60s, judging by the notes, that is, and it appears to have been made by a W. Thompson. Never heard of him, but maybe a bit of research will help answer that inquiry. You two can head back if you want. I'll stay here a bit longer. I'll close up here once I've finished. Suit yourself, said Casey. I'm already behind time getting Lady Grange ready, so I better hurry up. Whitehouse followed, but stopped by the doorway and looked back. His cousin seemed to be really engulfed in this machine and began to think that maybe this might be something of a change for him to be focused on rather than steam engines. But then again, he had a feeling that maybe this would be something best left alone. He couldn't tell why, but it just didn't seem right somehow. Still, if it's something his cousin can't handle, who's he to get in the way? Over the next few days, Corpse was rarely seen at the railway. He would make the odd appearance now and again, but only for collecting tools and materials from the stores. Then he would head back up the road with the feeling of enthusiasm about him. What do you suppose has gotten into him? Asked Cars to Casey. He's only been here no less than half an hour, and he goes off again. Just what is he up to? He's working on something, Casey said. Something he's found, and no doubt will be finding ways of knowing what it does. Well, I just hope he takes time off to do some practicing for Saturday. Henry's accordion got damaged yesterday, so we may have to think of a backup tune to sing to cover for him, if he hasn't repaired it in time. Oh, that's all we'll need, sighed Whitehouse, who'd arrived with a rake of coaches. A squeeze box that's gotten squashed. Don't feel so down about it, said Casey. We were singing just fine last rehearsal. Weren't we, Cars? Only just, muttered Cars from the depth of his clipboard. I just hope it all works out in the end. He walked back to his office in a worried but thoughtful sort of way. He passed Jane, who was coming back from her break. Hey, what's up with Mark? Seems in a right state today and it's not even noon. He's probably worried because we haven't had enough time to practice for the concert on Saturday, explained Casey. To be honest with you, I'm not feeling up to doing any more singing. I'm the same. If I have to sing one more high note, my throat will crack, Whitehouse said, rubbing the front of his neck to soothe a troubled area. Well, I've got good news for you, because we won't be doing it. The boy stared blankly. You sure, Jane? They asked. Or are you pulling our legs? Quite sure. The notice about it went up there on the board just now. It seems we're in for a kind of scientific kind of entertainment come Saturday. I wonder what it could be. Your guess is as good as ours, said Casey. He looked to the skies and pondered. I wonder if it's got anything to do with Corpse in that machine. Maybe he's made a breakthrough and found out what it does. What machine are you talking about? Asked Jane. I've heard rumours that Corpse is working on a new project, but he won't let anyone in on it. Jane listened carefully as the boys explained about what happened and why Corpse was making very rare appearances at the railway. They did their best to illustrate what they'd seen, but she still couldn't work out exactly what they were describing. Further up the road, in the ruined depths of the Motorcar Society, Bernard Martin Williams was giving his goons, Grinder and Gears, an earful over their recent blunder in the sales room. £10,000 I said to sell that convertible for, and what did you end up receiving? 1 pence. 1 bloody pence, that's how much you sold it for. Well, sir, it was Gears' fault for not checking the sign was on properly, protested Grinder. That's rich coming from the person who actually stuck the price tag upside down. I told you to turn it round, but would you listen? It was your nagging that let me do it. I do not nag. You do. Nag, nag, naggity nag. Enough, bellowed Bernard. The brothers jumped in surprise. As a result of your sibling rivalry, we're £10,000 down in our profits, and another £2,000 to cover the cost of that buyer's hospital bills. Seems a certain somebody didn't wait for the superglue to fully set on the steering wheel before the vehicle had left the site. Well, at least we're 1 pence up, Gear said, trying to lighten the mood. His smile dropped as Bernard glared at him. 3 months oil filtering for the mistake, another 4 for the debt, and 12 months for your sly remark. And be sure that I'll have more lined up for you should any of you have anything to add to the matter. Now get out of my sight, the pair of you. The two brothers left the office fuming over the next few months of torture. Who does a fat windbag think he is? Complained Grinder as they walked down the steps of the office gantry. We do our best to please His Highness, and what do we get in return? I swear he's gone too far this time, agreed Gears. That price tag mishap could have happened to anyone. If you ask me, it was the customer's fault for jumping to conclusions before driving off like that. Well, the next time Mr. High Almighty gets too much for us to handle, I'm handing in my cards, announced Grinder firmly. And the next time I hear anyone complain about how I discipline my staff for shoddy salesmanship, you won't have any hands to hand in your cards with, came a voice from above. The brothers looked up to see Bernard's office window a fraction open. The gentle stream of the olive green smoke from his cigar told them quite clearly that he'd been listening to the whole thing. Now then, Bernard's voice said through the slit in the window, any other comments you wish to say about how I run my business? No? Good. And the slit shut with a snap. Well, I suppose we better get started then, muttered Gears quietly. Grinder grunted. He looked back at the window as he kicked an old can out of the courtyard dirt. It bounced against a set of old tires before slamming hard into his face. For once, he said, to no one in particular, I'd like to have a boss that's better than him. But you said that we were instructed to do the concert, sir. It says quite so clearly in this letter. That is correct, Mr. Carson, but the directors have made some last-minute changes. What's been done has been done, and I can't change it. But what about all our hard work and the rehearsals? The chairman smiled reassuringly. They'll be of use when the time is needed for them. Besides, I think one or two of your lads were not too keen when the task was set before them. Oh, they would be, wouldn't they? Muttered Cars. But tell me this, sir, what exactly has been agreed by the directors that's replacing us on Saturday? As far as I know, the discovery of the century as we know it. It seems our workshop foreman has stumbled upon something that could well and truly change the way we live. What it is, I'm not so sure. Is anyone else involved with this? Well, Chris and Mike will be staying here for the night to help out with the transportation. At least that's what Jane reported to me earlier. I've put word out to security about that, and they'll have everything monitored. Good. Well then, till tomorrow then, Mr. Carson. Till tomorrow, sir. Okay, lower it steady. Lower. Okay, stop. Right, okay, that's fine. Leave it there. The three made quick progress on transporting the machine from the old workshops to the railway. A stage had been assembled close by to the steaming bays, and Corpse was busy guiding Casey and Whitehouse as they strained to carry the precious parts of the machine into place. So, what have you found out about this thing anyway, Corpse? Can it really do the impossible and change the way we live? Asked Casey. Well, not for living exactly, but from what I read up in this book I found, it does help with something else that troubles people who want more out of life. But I'll explain about that here tomorrow. Anyway, thanks for your help with this here, lads. Do you need a hand to get it all set up here? Said Whitehouse. No, really. It's pretty much all straightforward from here on in, so I should have it all set up by the morning. You two get yourselves bunked down in the mess room, and I'll shout if I need anything. Casey and Whitehouse watched a bit more as Corpse began to fiddle with the circuitry. It is something to behold, isn't it? Asked Whitehouse after a while. I suppose, remarked Casey. My only concern is, I just hope it doesn't stay here permanently. You what? Well, you know, people need to access the steaming bays and all that. And how are they supposed to take on water here when the standpipe's blocked off? Can't they just use the one at the engine sheds? Casey looked horrified. Use the one at the... Oh, no, that won't do at all. What's wrong with that? It's the same water after all. Yeah, that's not the point though. It's just that I... Stick to a routine, suggested Whitehouse. Well, you could put it like that, I suppose, yeah. It's just not convenient, that's all. And are there going to be many traction engines here tomorrow? Casey hesitated. No, I was just thinking about taking Lady Grange out for a drive. Whitehouse laughed. So what are you complaining about then? Honestly, Casey, how is it we still manage to keep this railway going? By sticking to what we know best, smirked Casey. Anyways, whatever this machine does, I doubt it'll be anything spectacular. Chapter 2. The Unplanned Journey. Hello and welcome listeners to this wonderful summer's day here at the Model Engineer Society. I'm your host Jeff Rewind here at Radio Replay, broadcasting live from the railway's grounds, where the discovery of the century will be unveiled to all to witness very shortly. It's quite a turnout, isn't it, Bob?
Indeed, Jeff. Right now we are currently awaiting the unveiling of this new discovery by its founder, Mr. Roy Clements, who is currently seen to the last few checks.
Brightly coloured bunting hung from tree to tree around the grounds, while the crowds all gathered to get a glimpse at the latest discovery. Corpse was seen for the last-minute adjustments underneath the tarpaulin on which the machine was completely covered in. He had been up until the late hours of the morning, making sure that everything was put right and that everything was where it should be. Cars and Jane was watching close by. "Well, if your discovery can beat our concert, Corpse, then I take my hat off to you," commented Cars. "Oh, it will. You just wait and see," Corpse's voice replied under the tarpaulin. Only his legs could be seen from underneath as he fiddled with a bad solder joint. "Is there an adjustable spanner in the toolbox, Jane?" "No, but there's one spanner out here who's getting very impatient," Jane laughed. Cars rolled his eyes, smiling. Deep down he was pleased the concert was cancelled and was eager as everyone else to know what the machine did. It truly was a fascinating bit of kit, and he noticed that some of the pressmen were even more eager to see what it does. "Casey and Whitehouse about?" "They were here with you last night, were they not?" asked Jane. "I sent them to get some breakfast before everyone arrived," said Cars. "They're probably in the queue to get back to the railway." "Well, I can't start the unveiling until they arrive," said Corpse. "I want you all to be present to see this thing going." "Well, hopefully they should be on their way back," reassured Jane. Cars looked around the grounds to keep an eye out for Casey and Whitehouse. What he did see for a split second was a flash of light reflecting off something on top of the wall that surrounded the railway. It only appeared for a brief moment, but it made Cars wonder what it could have been. "Phew, that was close. He nearly saw me then," Grinder exclaimed. "I wonder what they're doing with that strange device." "What device? And stop squatting down like that. It's bad enough having you to stand on my shoulders to begin with." "Oh, stop complaining. Anyways, you're broad-shouldered, so it makes it easier for me to keep a balance." "Oh, it's not doing my shoulders any good," Gears protested. "Here, what makes you think Bernard will not notice that we haven't turned up for work yet? He'll skin us if he found out we're not there." "He'll skin us anyway if you don't approach him with good news. Now keep quiet while I see if the coast is clear. And move over to the left a little, so the sun doesn't reflect off the binoculars." Staggering under the weight of his brother, Gears manoeuvred sideways across the wall's edge. What with it being a wall of many overgrown horticulture, it was also the home of many flying insects, some of the stinging variety. A wasp nest was located at the foot of a small tree. Gears didn't know about this, but the wasps did. And they weren't happy about an oncoming human with its big hobnail boots about to ruin their nice little home. A squadron of them took off and proceeded to advance around Gears' head, in an attempt to drive him away. Gears began swatting the wasps away, but they didn't seem to go. "Keep still, will you?" exclaimed Grinder, who was starting to lose his balance. "They're all over me! Gah!" yelped Gears. "Gears, you blithering idiot, watch what you're doing!" "What on earth is going on over there?" asked Jane, looking across to where the commotion was coming from. "Beats me," said Cars. "Seems to be coming from the wall over there." It was no use. There were too many wasps for Gears to handle. He threw up his arms and made a dash out of the way. Grinder finally lost his balance and fell head over heels onto the road, just as Casey's car appeared. "Case, look out!" There was a blaring of the horn, skidding brakes sounded, and dust filled the air. Slowly opening his eyes, Grinder saw that the car had just stopped within millimeters of his head, the grille staring at him with the engine growling like a lion in a cage. He fell back and fainted. Whitehouse slowly raised his head from the dashboard and looked around. "Are you alright, Case?" Casey raised his head from the steering wheel, still shaking. "I'm alright. A bit shaken, but I'll live another day." "Let's just see if Grinder can too." They stepped out to help Gears lift his brother to the grass verge. Casey took off his cap and began fanning it to revive Grinder. "And just what do you think you two are playing at? Surely your mother told you it was unsafe to play near roads." "We weren't playing. And what can I say about you, driving like a lunatic? I've a good mind to report you to the directors." "Oh yeah," said Whitehouse. "And I'm sure they'll also be wanting to know why you two were snooping around here. Up to your old tricks again, eh?" "None of your business, Smurfhead. For your information, we were simply having a stroll around the grounds." "Is that a fact?" "Huh. Grady can tell you when he comes round." Yes, well, I'm sure you can tell him that we'll be putting a complaint about this later on, said Casey, putting his cap back on. The two got back into the car and continued their way into the grounds. Grinder opened an eye. Have they gone yet? Just about. Why? Because they wouldn't like to see what I'm about to do to you now. What the hell were you playing at? Trying to get me killed? I don't think Brenda will have anything to work with by the time I'm done with you. At last! I thought you weren't going to make it, said Jane. Casey hesitated. We got, held up by an obstruction in the traffic, but we're here now, nonetheless. Good. Then we can start the unveiling, said Corpse. I'm sorry to stop you there, Bob. It appears Mr. Clements is just about to start the unveiling, said the radio announcer. Corpse stepped proudly to where the mic was placed on the podium. Everyone quieted down as he began to address them. Ladies and gentlemen, visitors young and old, I thank you all for attending this event, which I'm sure has been a great interest to you all. Behind me is a piece of work that many have never clapped eyes on, and will definitely be a great help in the way we travel today. May I present to you the tech. Corpse pulled the tarpaulin off, and the large machine was revealed to all. Everyone awed at the size of the structure. This machine was first discovered only a few days ago, not far off from where we are now. The workshop where it was stored had never been opened, nor disturbed during the time it had been standing. After studying what information I could trace about this machine, I found it to be the work of Mr. William Thompson, who vanished mysteriously no more than 30 years ago. How I know about this was down to this book, which contained all his notes regarding his machine and the trials and errors he went through to get it to work. Some of the parts you see on it will have been carefully machined right down to the nuts and bolts. Among the notes in Williams's book I was supposed to know of was that almost half of this machine was machined right here at this engineering hub by one of our eldest society members. Sadly, he passed away a few months ago. If he had been around a bit longer, he would have seen what his skilled work was put into. What is it? What can you see? Asked Gears. Both he and Grinder reverted themselves to the brick archway at the start of the railway. Grinder peered through his binoculars to get a better look at the machine. It looks like some sort of giant metallic donut, he said slowly. Well, that doesn't sound very exciting. I know, but they're making a big fuss over it. Keep quiet, I'm trying to listen. Yeah, that's all very well and good, Mr. Clements, but what exactly does this machine do? Asked a reporter for the Daily Glass. I was just coming to that, sir, said Corpse. What TEC stands for is Telepathic Engineered Corridor. A sort of gateway that allows anyone to pass through the portal ring and emerge in a different location. You've heard of the story Alice Through the Looking Glass. Well, this does exactly the same thing. The last note in Williams's book states that he solved the solution to his errors and that the tech was in full working order, which brings me on to the demonstration. Corpse walked grandly over to the main portal ring which stood behind him with its strong cast iron brackets towering over him. I will require a volunteer. Miss Jane Wilkinson, could you please come up and join me? Jane was unsure about the whole thing, but noticed Corpse give a wink of a hint of promise that everything would be fine. Slowly she climbed the stage and walked over to where Corpse stood. Everything will be fine, he whispered to her, his hand holding hers in a comforting sort of way. Just follow my instructions and you'll be all right. He turned back to the audience. Now, young Jane here will be the first person to be travelled by TEC, or in its proper title, the Telepathic Engineered Corridor. Now, Jane, if you could remain standing where you are by the centre of the ring, we will begin. Now, the next thing I need to do is to program in the coordinates to transport her to a different location. In this case, our mess room will do fine. Now, watch closely, everyone. A mess is what will be in that room if this thing doesn't work, a lady in the crowd commented. Cars heard that remark, and he walked over to Corpse, who was typing in the last codes to the tech's internal computer. Rory, are you sure you know what you're doing? Only in serious situations did Cars, Corpse, Casey or Whitehouse address each other by their real names. Corpse turned and could see the seriousness in his friend's eyes. You've got nothing to worry about, he said. Jane will be fine. Trust me. He pressed enter on the text keyboard. Within the machine, a small hum quietly began to make itself known, then louder and louder. Soon, the ring began to spark. Blue streams of electricity began to form within the center before a spiral vortex began to take shape. Jane was frightened and wanted to run. Stay where you are, Jane, called Corpse. One wrong move and it'll all end in disaster. Cars had enough. That's enough, Corpse. Turn this machine off right now. But Corpse held him back. Teleportation in 3. Corpse, turn it off. 2. Rory! 1. Mark! Jane exclaimed. Here we go! Corpse pressed another button. A sudden force of vacuum had taken hold of Jane, and before anyone could do anything else, she was propelled backwards into the vortex. For a moment, she was seen with her arms and legs stretched out before her molecules were broken down to atoms, like a sugar cube dissolving in hot water. There was a sudden bright light, and then there was silence. Everyone stood at the spot on which Jane stood, to where the ring remained, with its centre slowly dispensing small streams of steam. He killed her! Someone shouted from the crowd. Murder! Call the police! Called another, but Corpse held his hands up. Everyone, please calm yourselves. This is all part of the process. That white light you just witnessed there was Jane herself being transported from this spot to the inside of our mess room. Now, if you've all calmed yourselves down long enough, you'll see that she is perfectly unharmed. He held his arms out towards the mess room and called out, Jane Wilkinson, can you step out to meet us? Everyone's eyes panned over towards the mess room. If you've harmed Jane in any way, Roy Clements, said Cars grimly, I swear I'll never forgive you. Trust me, Mark, she's perfectly fine. Corpse called out again. Jane, are you there? The handle on the mess room door turned. A cloud of steam followed, and Jane, not knowing what happened, stepped out to the mighty applause of the cheering crowd. As you can see, everyone, the demonstration was a complete success. Jane, come up here and take a bow. You did wonderfully. Jane did so, and everyone cheered again. She didn't know what to say when the press rushed up to ask what it was like. I don't believe it. I simply don't believe it. Grinder turned with his back to the wall and stared at the ground speechless. I just don't believe it. That machine just transported her from one side to another in less than a millisecond. It's the breakthrough in the history of history. Imagine if we had that technology in our motor vehicles, Gear said as he joined him. We would be the world's first to have the most up-to-date vehicles ever. That will give those NASCAR folk a run for their money. I'm sure Bernard will be more than happy when we present him with this, said Grinder. Gears looked sharply over. What? He demanded. Give it to Bernard? Oh, yeah, to get back into his good books. He'd treat us better and perhaps might make us, higher above the ladder of business. But Gears was not too keen. Or perhaps we take it for ourselves and start our own range of vehicles, he suggested. We could outdo Bernard in no time if we could get our hands on it first. True, said Grinder after a while. But how do we get that thing out of there without anyone seeing us? Well, we'll see to that once things are quietened down, said Gears, looking round the corner again. We'll just keep watch here until everyone has gone home for the day. Then we'll strike when the time's right. It took several hours before Corpse could join his friends again after so many interviews. The tech was indeed an ultimate breakthrough, and everyone wanted to know its secrets. But Corpse kept a lid on telling them about it, and that was that. Many thought the tech was just one big giant magic act, but there was no way of proving it. The Steam Fair brought in more visitors than ever, and everyone wanted to get a closer look at the tech. The day passed so quickly that it seemed like it only lasted for a few minutes. Never before had the Model Engineer Society earned so many donations from the visitors. There was more than enough to cover the Society's debts, and enough for improvements to be made for the upcoming months. The five sat by the stage chatting about the day's events as the sun began to set behind the trees. The chairman came up to give Roy his congratulations. Well done indeed, Mr. Clements. As a result of your scientific discovery, the Steam Fair was our best ever. If only we had something like this machine before. It would have been a great asset for us. It was nothing, sir. But it's Mr. Thompson you ought to show thanks for. I merely helped restore his genius. Well, wherever he is, I'm sure he'll be proud to know that his work was not wasted. Good evening to you all. Evening, sir. Now it was just the five of them left. 5 good friends who were now looking forward to what the future lies before them. So, what are you going to do now with the tech? Asked Whitehouse. Well, I don't know, really, said Corpse. Any ideas? How about we scrap it? Case? What? It's an eyesore. Yes, there's a good bit of engineering and all, but it's not steam-powered. Actually, it sort of is. What? Casey walked over for a closer inspection. Corpse pointed to the caster he found in the workshop. It was propped up against the unit next to the ring. "I found this here whilst I was looking over the machine," explained Corpse. "At first I thought it was just an old oil can, but it appears to be the machine's fuel supply. At least I think it is." "So what is it exactly? Petrol? Diesel?" "Well, despite the colour and the thickness of it, my tests all come out with the same result. It's apparently water." "Water?" everyone exclaimed. "Well, something like water. I've done a few tests, and it doesn't have any radioactive presence or anything that can cause any harm to a living being. But then, considering that this water is from the 1970s, I'd say it was slightly thicker back then. So, yeah, the tech is actually a steam-propelled machine." "Can that water work for the likes of Lady Grange?" asked Casey slowly. "Well, I'd say it would, Case, but I'll have to do some more tests first to properly confirm that it really is water and not something else." "Speaking of tests, you said that if I moved from where I was standing here earlier, it could all end in disaster. What did you mean by that?" asked Jane. They can tell now from Corpse's expression that he was a little hesitant to answer. "Well," said Cars. I must confess that even though the performance went as planned, there were a few technical bits that still need tuning," said Corpse. "In what way?" Cars said slowly. "Are you saying Jane could have been killed if she ever moved?" "Well, I don't know, but I dread to think of what would have happened if she had. Williams's notes are old and at times difficult to make out, but Jane didn't move and that's all that matters." "What about two people at once, though? Wouldn't something like that cause a disruption of the molecule breakdowns?" asked Whitehouse. "If you're referring to that film The Fly, you've nothing to thread over," said Corpse. "No insect could survive this kind of travel. But say if two people were travelling together, what happens then?" "To be honest with you, I really don't know. None of the notes say anything about having more than one person travelling through it, but I think it's just strictly a one-person-only system." "That might be for the best, providing it's strictly kept," said Cars gravely. "Maybe that's why nobody discovered it. Perhaps. But look at it this way. Corpse actually found something that scientists have been trying to achieve for decades. And I think this calls for a celebration." Whitehouse went over to the mess room and brought out a few cans of cola for them. Of course, alcohol was forbidden to be consumed on the Society's grounds. "My friends," he said, opening a can, "I propose a toast to my cousin, Rory Clements, whose greatest achievement has helped the Society become as popular as we could ever make it. To Rory! To Rory!" everyone cheered. "Anyone left?" asked Grinder as he arrived to where Gears was hiding. "Just the 5 left, but they should be heading off very soon." "Right, as soon as the mechanical fool is left alone, we'll move in." "Would it hurt if we gave it another try?" asked Casey. "I don't know, Case," said Cars, "after what Corpse told us there now. Well, it worked fine with Jane earlier." "Yes, I know, but I don't think transporting another human would be safe." "Well, we could transport something else, though, instead. Doesn't have to be a living thing." They looked around the grounds to see what they could use. "What about this old bucket?" suggested Jane. "I'd say that'll do all right," said Corpse, heading over to the controls. "Place it in the middle of the ring and stand well clear, in case the vacuum pulls you in." Grinder peered round the wall as he heard the tech whir up again. "Right, they're distracted," he whispered to Gears. "Now's our chance. Come on." Jane placed the bucket in front of the ring and stood well clear with the others. Corpse typed in the codes into the tech system. "Where shall we send it?" he asked. "Send it over to that wall portal over there," said Casey, and pointed to the portal where Grinder and Gears were hiding. "Okay." Carefully checking the controls, Corpse programmed the location on which to send the bucket. "Here we go." Corpse pressed the release button and the vortex showed in the ring once more, breaking down the bucket structure and preparing it to be transported to its new location. "Transportation in 3, 2, 1. A flash of light shone, which came as a shock to Grinder and Gears, who had just entered through the portal. "Ugh!" exclaimed Grinder. "I can't see!" Then the light vanished. There then came a sudden clang as something metal fell onto his head. "Hey, who turned out the lights?" Grinder yelled, as he fought to get the bucket off his head. Gears tried to get a grip of it, but Grinder kept knocking him away. "What on earth are those two doing here?" said Cars, upon seeing their unexpected guests. At last, the bucket gave way, and like a cork out of a bottle, Grinder's head popped out. Where did that thing come from? He demanded. Then he heard laughter and looked up to see the group laughing at his mishap. Oh, so you think it's funny, do you? He growled. You could say, chuckled Casey. Hey, see if there's another bucket about and we'll let Gears join in too. Well, have this then, fumed Gears, and with a flick of his wrist he threw the bucket hard at them. Watch out! Cried Cars as the bucket flew through the air and collided with the text control panel. Whitehouse tripped over a loose cable that was lying on the stage, sending his can of cola out of his hand and the contents spilling over the electrics. Sparks showered from the controls. The computer monitors flashed rapid colours at great speeds. The tech began to hum once more, but at speeds too fast to register. What's happening? Cried Jane. I need to override the error and shut her down, exclaimed Corpse, frantically punching in any codes he could think of. But no matter what he did, the controls wouldn't respond. Then he remembered Williams's notebook and turned to the last page where a code he had not yet typed in was written. This has to be the override code. Strings of lightning appeared again in the ring before the vortex began to appear in the center. Corpse hammered the code in, but nothing happened. Nothing's working! I can't turn it off! Ah! Another round of sparks exploded in Corpse's face and sent him flying from the controls. Whitehouse hurried over to see if he was all right, but the vacuum created from the vortex took hold of him, and he stumbled to the ground. His fingers clawed at the floor of the stage to get a grip. I'm being dragged in! Screamed Whitehouse. The vacuum grew more and more stronger. Hold on, Mike! Yelled Casey, and dashed over. Be careful, Chris! Called Cars. He looked on, desperately for someone to use an anchor cord. A length of rope lay close by. Wrapping it round his waist, Cars made his way carefully to where Casey was, still trying to pull Whitehouse to safety. I can't hold on much longer, Casey whimpered. Chris, grab my hand! Cars reached out and tried to grab Casey's stretched out hand. Just as he did, there came a sudden groan. The wooden floor from the stage began to break up. A plank broke away, shooting into the depths of the vortex. Careful, Mark! Called Jane. Then she looked down in horror as the boards beneath her began to groan. She turned to run for safety, but the boards broke free, propelling her towards the vortex. Jane! Yelled Corpse, and dived forwards. He caught her in his arms as they rolled along the stage towards Cars, who grabbed Jane's other hand and was holding on for dear life. Try and grab Chris's hand, Rory! Called Cars. Corpse looked around and could see that he wasn't too far off from Casey and Whitehouse. With a great effort, he managed to grasp Casey's hand. The group were now holding on to each other like a daisy chain, praying that it wouldn't snap. This is it! The end for us all! Exclaimed Jane, tears rolling down her face. Don't give up now, Jane, gasped Cars. Just hold on tight! He looked round and saw Grinder and Gears were still standing where they were. Grinder! Gears! Give us a hand! Quickly! Grinder and Gears hurried over, but they stopped a few feet away from where the stage was. What are you doing? Gasped Cars. Pull us back, quickly! And what's in it for us? Asked Grinder slyly. Grinder, for God's sake, pull us in! Yelled Cars. Switch the machine off! Oh, I don't know, said Gears. I mean, it all looks too complicated for us to handle. It was hopeless. Then, suddenly, at the foot of the chain, the group could hear Whitehouse let out a scream. I'm slipping! I'm slipping, guys! Mike, hold on! Too late, his grip was lost. With an almighty scream, Whitehouse was pulled into the vortex. His molecules were broken down and then vanished. No! Yelled Casey. Grinder! Gears, for fuck's sake, pull us to safety! Screamed Cars. Now seeing the situation becoming more serious, Grinder hurried to the stage and he and Gears grabbed Cars' anchor rope. They pulled with all their might. The vacuum was getting stronger, and soon they too could feel its grip descending on them too. It's no use, we're not strong enough, called Gears. Come on, you two, pull! Encouraged Cars. Then another sound was heard, one that the group never wanted to hear at a time like this. The rope was starting to creak. The strain was getting too much for it, and at last, it snapped. The two boys fell backwards as they watched in horror as the fort disappeared beneath the depths of the vortex. Seeing their bodies break down to small atoms was a sight they never wanted to see. They sprang back to their feet. We better get out of here too, exclaimed Gears, as he and Grinder watched on helplessly. Cleaning oil seems like a dream job than working with the likes of this, said Grinder. They turned to run, but it was too late. The vacuum strength had reached them, and it took hold. Nothing the brothers could do to save themselves from being pulled into the vortex and the molecules broken down just like the others. It was all over in seconds. The tech shuddered wildly, sending streams of light around the perimeter of the yards, before at last the system began to wear down. The last few sparks scattered across where the vortex had formed, till they faded into plumes of steam. The humming within the tech system became quieter and quieter, till at last the silence hit the site like a bombshell. Not a trace was left of the group, except a battered bucket and Lady Grange. She still sat on her siding where Casey had left her, waiting for her driver to return and rekindle her fire, which was already starting to burn out. Chapter 3. The Unplanned Arrival. Blackness. All around, there was nothing but blackness. The only sound that could be heard was that of a very deep-bassed hum, like the sound of being submerged in water. A lone figure lay across the dark abyss. It was wearing a uniform of a railway locomotive driver. The letters MES fixed to a small badge that sat in the centre of a battered cap, which lay at the side of the figure. A hand twitched slightly as consciousness began to take hold. Casey sat up and rubbed his eyes with the back of his hand. He blinked several times to check that he could see all right, but that would have been a waste of time, seeing as there wasn't anything to look at. He stood up and looked around, stumbling on his weakened legs. Where was he? Where was the Engineer Society? Then he remembered. He remembered being pulled into the void by the tech, and both him and the others had their bodies broken down to little bits and sent whizzing through the unknown path. Then, well, he couldn't remember anything after that. But the one thing that was repeating in his mind was where he was now and whether the others were all right. He couldn't think straight with this muffled bass-like noise going through his mind. Casey picked up his cap and tried to see if he could find a way out. He walked straight into something in the darkness and fell to the ground again. Oh, that hurt. Oh, it felt like he walked into a tree. Standing up again, Casey felt round till he could feel the hidden object in front of him. It almost felt like a tree. He could feel the bark of the trunk and a few of the branches coming out. With his arms stretched out, Casey felt his way around again. He could feel another tree in front of him. Okay, wherever he is, he's in an open country of sorts. But it couldn't be during the night, for he could clearly see his hands stretched out before him. Something broke through the loud bassness of the void sound. It was muffled, but getting clearer by the second. Birdsong. Now his vision was beginning to restore itself. Casey looked round and began taking in the surroundings that slowly began to appear before him. He was in an opening in a forest with trees filled with blossom. It was unimaginable. The grass was long with buttercups growing long and strong. But along the grass, Casey could see a path that had been made leading to the edge of the forest. Casey advanced forwards, taking great care in case the ground beneath him should become unstable. Thankfully it wasn't. Emerging into the clearing, the next thing Casey could hear was the sound of chatter. Familiar chatter. He followed it to where he found Cars, Corpse and Jane standing in a group and contemplating on something. Jane turned round and saw him approaching them. "Oh, Casey, I'm glad you're all right. How do you feel?" Fine, thanks, Jane. What about you? Are you okay?" "We're fine, Case. What puzzles me is, where are we? I don't recognize this place at all. It doesn't look like the grounds of the Model Engineer Society." "But there must be some way of knowing," asked Cars. "Can you remember what you typed into the tech when you tried to shut it down?" Corpse paced back and forth, tapping the side of his head in a thoughtful manner. He sometimes does this here when he wants to try and work things out quick and fast. "It was a code I saw in Williams's book that I thought was some sort of an override. Only, I don't have the book to properly understand what it was for." "Hey, look at this!" The others hurried over to where Casey was standing. Before him was a duplicate of the tech. Only this one looked worse to wear. Its cast iron brackets were covered in rust, and moss grew along the panels and switches of the tech circuit boards, which hung out of the casing in sheets of corroded clapboards. Plants and weeds grew out of nearly every opening the tech had, almost consuming the machine entirely. Corpse felt the large metal ring that stood between the rusting brackets. "Still warm," he said slowly. He tapped in a few keys on the panel. An image came into view on the computer screen. It was dim and rapidly fading, but Corpse managed to type in the current location before the screen went dead. "Well, what did it say?" asked Cars. "Are we still on Earth?" "Sort of," came the response. Corpse turned round and looked at them with a very serious look on his face. "From what the tech informed me, we're in another dimension." "What?" It's hard to explain really, but to sum it up briefly, there are many dimensions similar to our own, only with a slight difference that makes it different to ours. You could have woken up on the different side of the bed, or you went to a different school. Heck, there's probably one version here where we're actually members of the Motorcar Society. We've wound up in one of these dimensions, though I don't know what difference this one has. Well, does it have a name? Well, that's what I was worried about. You see, it seems that when I typed in that code to try and override the malfunction, I appear to have typed in Williams's last entry code. The code that I think that he typed in before his mysterious disappearance. The code was 326P. "So could this be where he ended up? Somewhere around here?" said Cars. "I really don't know," said Corpse. I really don't know. But Jane was more worried about something else. "What about us getting home, Corpse? Is there no way of fixing this to get us back?" Corpse turned around and looked at the tech again. He tried turning the system on again, but no life came through. He tried several codes to start up, but again, just a blank screen showed on the monitor. "But it must still work if it managed to get us here," stated Cars. "I thought that too," said Corpse, trying out another code with little success. "The one in our dimension managed to send for enough power to send us through, but looks to have been its final bit of work at this end. I doubt this thing will ever work again, not unless I actually have the right parts to replace those that are damaged." A look of worry came over Jane's face. "But does this mean that we're stuck here? For good?" she asked. Corpse just turned and gave a worried shrug. Jane collapsed to the ground and buried her face in her crossed arms. Cars knelt down and tried to comfort her. "Well, look at the positivities of the matter," said Corpse, trying to lift the depression. "We're all alive and in one piece." "Not all of us." They turned and looked at Casey. "What do you mean, Case?" asked Cars. "Well, look for yourselves. Where's Mike? He was the first one to be pulled into the vortex, after all." "He's right. Before our vision was restored, we couldn't see anything. Maybe Whitehouse tried to find his way and got lost somewhere." "It's possible, but he shouldn't have gone far." "We could split up and look around for him," suggested Jane. "Good idea," said Cars, taking control of the matter. "Spread yourselves out and see if you can trace any signs as to where he might have gone." The group had only just started the search when there came a sudden yelp from Casey. They turned back to see him trying to pull himself out of the ground, which gave away beneath him. Taking an arm each, Cars and Corpse pulled him out to firmer ground, as Jane watched on. Some wire mesh was sticking to his boot, which he kicked away vigorously. "You alright, Case?" "Yeah, I'm alright. 1 minute there was ground and then there wasn't." "It's just as well you didn't fall in. Could have been seriously hurt." "Well, it's unlucky for me I did fall in," a voice from the hole called up. They all recognised the voice at once. "Whitehouse? Is that you?" They scraped away the moss and more wire mesh to reveal a sort of brick-made portal. "Shine your torch down there, Case, and see if you can spot him," instructed Cars. Casey took out his small compact torch and shone it through the shaft. He moved it about a bit till they could see a figure lying on their back. They could also see a large stone had fallen and was sitting where Whitehouse's right leg was. Whitehouse tried to pull it free, but winced as the pain of it prevented him from doing so. "It looks like he's badly hurt," said Cars. "We need to find a rope or something to get down there." "Hang on. I think I can see something else down there as well," said Casey. "What is it? What can you see, Case?" Casey shone the torch next to where Whitehouse was, and their light reflected off 2 steel rails. They almost looked like railway lines. "Now I understand. He's fallen through a tunnel vent. It's like a sort of small hole they make in railway tunnels that allows smoke to escape through whenever a train's inside. Before his vision was restored, Whitehouse mustn't have seen it and fell through." "Yeah, well, never mind explaining how it happened, Poirot. Get me out of here," Whitehouse called up angrily. Carr stood up and scratched his head as to what to do next. "Whitehouse, can you see any light ahead of you?" called Casey. Whitehouse looked around and pointed them to his right. "Good," said Cars. "There should be a tunnel mouth not far from here. Casey, Corpse, you come with me." "I'll go too," said Jane, but Cars held up his hand. "No, You stay here. Jane was shocked at the way he said this. But why not? He's injured, and I know first aid. The ground could be unstable, and there might be more of these tunnel vents that we don't know of. If we do find the tunnel opening, we'll bring Whitehouse back here. Then you can help see to his injuries. Jane sighed as the three made their way down through the long grass. She was only trying to be helpful. And why was Cars acting so authority about them all of a sudden? As she was brooding over this, she felt the ground beneath her begin to tremble. What was happening? The ground wasn't giving away, so it couldn't be that. She listened again. The sound was coming from the vent. She leaned in a little and could hear it more clearly. It was a kind of low thundering sound. Can you hear that, Mike? She called down. Whitehouse nodded. He can hear it. But what was worse was that the steel rails beneath him was beginning to hum very softly, but grew louder by the minute. Suddenly, Jane let out a scream. Jane, are you all right? Whitehouse called, but there was no answer. He tried to stand up, but it was too painful to do so. The three could just see the tunnel mouth sticking out from the hillock. It was an old red brick-built one, with the mortar crumbling from the lack of maintenance. A home signal stood not too far off, its lens smashed and the post suffering from woodworm. Casey stared at it as Cars and Corpse went into the tunnel. What's wrong, Case? Cars called back. It's just, I have this feeling that... What? Nothing. Well, come on! Corpse should be with Whitehouse now, and he needs help to carry him out. Casey followed, but not before giving the signal another glance. He thought for a second he saw it shudder, but it was probably his imagination. This railway couldn't still be in operation in the state it's in. As he disappeared into the darkness, a small groan came from the signal arm as the wires controlling it shifted its position to a downwards angle. Look, there he is. They caught up to Corpse, who was trying to help get the stone off Whitehouse's leg. Together they lifted it clear and saw that the leg was in a very awkward position. I think it's broken. I can't move it, Whitehouse winced. But we have to get out of here now, and Jane needs help. Why? Demanded Cars. But then they could all hear the low rumbling. The ground beneath them began to shudder. The rails hummed wildly, while small mounds of ballast jutted off the sleepers. The four looked in the opposite direction of the tunnel and saw a speck of light looming towards them. Quick, run! Yelled Cars. Casey, try and support Whitehouse with your left shoulder. I'll do the same with my right. You hurry ahead, Corpse. Move! Never had those boys run so fast in their entire lives. The light was gaining on them fast, and the sound of hissing steam dawned on them, which grew louder and louder. Sparks made by the screeching metal showered the walls of the tunnel as the boys continued running for their lives. We're not going to make it, yelled Casey. We've got to! We've got to! Exclaimed Cars. At last they could see an opening. With a great lunge, the four threw themselves into the embankment as the mighty goods train burst out of the mouth of the tunnel before screeching to a stop. The boys were completely out of breath and gasped deep lungfuls of air, knowing that the danger was over. At least, that's what they thought. As Casey was getting his breathing back in order, he felt a strong hand grip his waistcoat, and he was pulled up close to a pair of soot-stained, bloodshot eyes. The driver of the engine was a large build, but his arms the size of tree trunks. He looked round to where his fireman was apprehending the others. Unlike the driver, he was long and skinny, with a pearl-white goatee sticking out from a frail old chin on the sunken-eyed face. Let me go! You've got no right to grab me like that! Protested Casey, kicking furiously. The driver turned back to him and growled menacingly. Just as well I didn't mince you on the ballast! The voice was like gurgling gravel, sharp and hard. Thanks to you lot, we're already behind schedule, and no doubt have a wheel flat from the heavy braking. He turned back to his fireman. What shall we do with them, Pete? Peg them out along the sleepers? Nah, too good for them. We'll take them with us down to the boss and see what he makes them. He'll put them in their place. They all heard a scream, and they turned to see Jane being dragged by the ponytail down the embankment by an old plate layer. Found this one snooping around the old vent shafts, Carl. Smashed the wire mesh to pieces, she has, he said gruffly. That's not true, Jane yelled, trying to prise her hair from the firm grip. We were only trying to rescue our friend who'd... Aha, trespassing and vandalizing, the driver interjected. Well, this gets better and better for you all, doesn't it? Lock him in the brake van with Harold, he called over to the fireman. He'll keep watching them till we reach the end of the line. The gang struggled and squirmed, but the firm grips of the rail staff was too strong to break free from. The old guard was sitting by his desk doing a crossword puzzle in his paper when his concentration was disrupted by the unexpected company. "Harold, we got ourselves some trespassers and vandals here. See to it they don't cause any trouble till we reach the end of the line." The guard watched as the group were thrust onto the van's dusty floor. "All right, just leave them with me. I'll keep an eye on them," he said as the van door shut. The gang picked themselves up before falling to the floor again as the train jolted. They looked up at the guard, who in return looked down at them through a pair of half-moon spectacles. "You must excuse Carl," he said, turning back to his crossword. "He gets all steamed up when things go wrong for us here on this line. Same goes for Jeff, our plate layer. I swear every time something goes wrong, they always get so carried away." The five didn't say anything. The guard tapped his pencil on the page before placing it down to extract a large book from the other side of the table. He licked his fingers delicately as he tried to trace the page of the current date. "Now, as part of regulations, I have to document exactly what you lot were doing when Carl found you. I don't think I've seen folk like yourselves in these parts. You foreign?" Still there was silence. The guard frowned. "Well, at least say something. We can't always keep playing the staring game throughout this 2-hour-long journey to the top station." "And why should we?" asked Casey coldly. "Ah, you know you do have voices. Good." "We weren't doing anything wrong," insisted Jane. The guard looked at his book again and jotted down a note. "Well, according to Carl, you lot were trespassing inside the tunnel and vandalizing railway property." "But we weren't. We were trying to help our friend who had fallen through the tunnel shaft." The guard looked down at the state of Whitehouse's leg, and also made a note of this. They couldn't tell if seeing it would convince him at all. "We've been meaning to sort out the vegetation around that area for years," they heard him mutter, while the pencil scribbled away vigorously. They jumped as he snapped the book shut before turning towards them again. "And now, let's see if we can sort your friend out. From the looks of his leg, I'd say he's in quite a lot of pain." "It's fine, really," Whitehouse insisted. He tried to move, but it clearly showed he was not going to be able to stand properly. "I hardly think it's fine when it's bent at that kind of angle," the guard stated. "Now come over here steady and let's have a look." "Ah, yes. Your knee bone has come out of its socket and needs to be reattached. Now, just take deep breaths." What are you doing?" Whitehouse asked, looking unsure. "I'm going to try and push it back into place. You two, hold him steady now while I see to it." Casey and Cars held onto each side of Whitehouse's shoulders. But won't this hurt?" Whitehouse asked. "It will a lot more if you don't keep still. Right, here we go. Hold him firm, lads." "But wait, Snap! Oh, you!" Whitehouse's body lurched as the next stage of dislocation reduction took its toll. "Steady, Mike, steady," comforted Cars. "Remember, deep breaths now." "Oh, you, oh. Whitehouse tried so hard not to swear. The pain was unbearable. "There now," smiled the guard, sitting back up in his chair. "There's some bandages in the first aid box, and you can use these old flagsticks to make a splint. You'll be back walking again in no time." Jane returned with a small wooden box and began to secure the sticks to Whitehouse's leg. By now, the pain was already starting to wear off, and his breathing became more steady. The guard took out an old battered pipe and struck a match on the heel of his boot. "So," he said, puffing smoke like a steam engine, "I'd say that since we're going to be travelling companions for the next 2 hours, I'd say that some introductions are in order." He tipped his old black cap to them, revealing the snow-white hair he had underneath. "Harold Sinclair at your service. My friends call me Harry for short." "Nice to meet you," said Cars, feeling more comfortable to talk. "My name's Mark. This is Chris, Rory, Mike, and Jane." The others gave little nods and small mutters of greetings to the guard. "Oh, I take it from your clothes you're a fellow railwayman." This was towards Casey. His distinct choice of wardrobe always comprises his railway-themed waistcoat, the grease-topped cap with the MES badge shining brightly. "Yes, sir, steam passenger driver," he said grandly. "For a miniature railway," added Cars, bringing Casey back down to earth like a falling rock. "We're members of the Model Engineer Society, a sort of public attraction and engineering hub." "Never heard of one of those in these parts," said Harry. "In fact, I don't think there were any other railways besides ours." "Don't you have any besides this?" asked Jane. "This is the only railway in the whole country. At first there were plans to expand it, but due to the current law, we are forbidden to carry out such tasks." "And the condition of the tunnel and such?" Corpse inquired. "The taxes here have been treacherous," What money we do put by goes to the engines to keep the railway operating. Maintaining the line would cost too much. Seems strange not to maintain the only railway in the country, even though it is falling to bits, said Carr sternly. Harry sighed. Well, we keep going, no matter what. These little engines haven't given up yet. I'm glad to hear it, said Casey. How did you manage to get permission from our rulers to set up your railway? Harry asked inquisitively. If they'd known you had one set up without permission, they have every right to shut it down and destroy it. Who would? Asked Whitehouse, but Harry ignored him. Where exactly did you set up this railway? Where is it based? The group looked unsure as to how to explain this to the old guard. If they said they came from another dimension, he'd think that they were insane. But what excuse could they give? Actually, Jane said slowly, we're not really from round here, nor anywhere beyond this place. Harry looked at them puzzled. So you are foreigners? Sort of, Corp said carefully. It's difficult to explain this without giving you the impression that we're strange folk talking nonsense. A lot of strange things have been happening today, Harry said, looking out of the van's ducket window. Strange flashings of light and thunderous noises happening all around near the tunnel. And I've seen enough strange folk to tell the difference if they are sane or not. So which are you? Well, if you really want to know, began Cars, we're from another dimension. An identical world to this one, only with a slight change to separate from everything else. We came here by a machine called the Tech. They all looked up at Harry, expecting him to dismiss the response as codswallop. But to their surprise, he seemed more surprised than they were. How did you travel here exactly? He asked calmly. By a machine called the Tech, answered Corpse. It's kind of a big machine with a large ring located by the tunnel, Harry continued. He lowered his head slightly and stared at the floor. The group looked at each other confused. Harry's head jerked up so fast they all jumped. Did anyone see you? He asked urgently. Anyone besides Carl? No, it's just us on our own, said Casey. Harry sighed with relief. Well, it's important that you aren't discovered. As soon as we arrive at the end of the line, I'm taking you straight to the boss. I know he'll be very pleased to see you. Now, how about a cuppa? I'm sure you lot are parched. Jane smiled. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Beyond the forest edge, two lone figures lay motionless on the ground. Their clothes were tattered from their crash landing, but luckily they weren't severely hurt. But still, they didn't have the strength to regain consciousness. Some shrubbery moved as a broad-looking shadow emerged within the depths of the forest. It looked down grimly upon the sleeping brothers, wondering whom they were and where they had come from. The van lurched as the engine's brakes were applied. We're approaching the terminus, explained Harry, standing up. He placed his cap on his head and began dusting off his jacket, which was placed on the back of the chair. As soon as we pull up, I want you to follow me to meet the manager. Don't worry about Carl. Just stick with me and you won't come to any harm. The group nodded understandably as the train began its ascent into the station. The station was a small structure with two crumbling platforms infested with weeds and wildgrass. An old sign stood in the middle of one. Its letters now faded to the point where they were barely readable, but Cars could just make out the name. Timon and Brian. Timon and Brian? He asked, puzzled. Sanctuary of Sorrow, translated Jane. And by the sounds of it, it doesn't sound all that pleasing. But why call a station something as depressing as that? Asked Casey. It doesn't make any sense. You'll find out soon enough, Harry said, walking to the van's door. Now keep quiet now while I deal with this bit first. The train stopped and Harry slid the van's door open. The bright light of the evening sun shone through the doorway. After shielding their eyes, the others can see Harry gesturing them to move out. This way to the manager's office, he said, giving a hint of authority to the tone. After some hesitation, the others followed, keeping close should anything happen to them. As they passed the engine's cab, they felt the watchful eyes of its crew glaring down at them from the footplate. Casey could almost feel the driver's breath down his neck. He shuddered as he didn't dare look up at that grim, soot-covered face. Several passengers on the platform stopped what they were doing and stared at the group as Harry guided them to the main building. The structure was vintage, constructed of red brick and stone. Several roof tiles hung over the edge, not giving any signs as to when they would drop. It doesn't look like this place has been cared for ages, whispered Whitehouse. I wonder why nobody's ever complained about it. Corpse shrugged. I don't know, but from the way things are looking, I'd say this railway's on its last legs. He nearly walked into the back of Harry as it came to a sudden stop by a sun-bleached green door. Wait here, please, Harry instructed, before knocking on the door 3 times. A muffled response from within told him that he could enter, leaving the group sitting outside, wondering what to expect next. What do you suppose he's going to do with us? Asked Jane nervously. Well, they can't arrest us. We already explained to him that we didn't do anything wrong, Casey said. Even so, I don't think they take too kindly to newcomers here, said Cars, looking on. They followed the direction in which he was looking to see a few passengers still watching them with suspicion. Scared children hung tight to their mothers, while an old man squinted his eyes menacingly at them. The door opened again and Harry stepped out. Come on in, you're expected. Just relax, everyone, alright? Said Cars. He took hold of Jane's hand and he led the group inside the office. Those were the first 3 chapters of the feature-length audio special, The Adventure Like No Other. It was written and read by Michael White, with music accompaniment by Mark Ricoden. This audiobook was edited by Michael White. Stay tuned for the next installment where we find out what happens next.